Hello again, this is Charlie Bellefontaine, and you're listening to the Homebuyer's Hour on WCPT AM. It's going to be our three experts in the, wow, I just said experts, sorry, I think I just jinxed everybody here, but I got Patrick, who I value quite a bit, in the studio with me, so I'm going to let Patrick introduce himself, please.
I mean, do you think there are some days when I lack expertise? I mean,
never once.
Literally,
I never think that at all.
Unfortunately, my brain has been warped in such a way that, I can only think about real estate sometimes. And,
it's a disease, Patrick. It's a disease.
It is. The more I'm working with my therapist to come up with a diagnosis, and we'll name it after her, which is fine. But I'm going to be the patient zero as far as the illness that invades your mind when it comes to real estate. My name is Patrick Loftus. I'm a real estate lawyer. If you are selling a home or buying a home, you want to get me involved to make sure things go smoothly. Social media. On TikTok, find me at Loftus Law. You can also find me on Instagram, Loftus_law. You can also find me on LinkedIn. But that's all.
It's like a little on the aggressive side there, right? I don't know. Joey.
It seemed cranky, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Somebody put their underwear on the wrong way or something. I don't know what's going on, but or they're too tight. I don't know. But anyway, let's just skip off of that. Maybe we'll try and ignore him a little bit.
That is hopefully the last time Charlie talks about my underwear.
I hope so, too. Joey, give us the rundown, please.
Joey Mathews, the VA Loan Nerd, NMLS 1330694. You can find me across all the social medias as at the VA Loan Nerd. And you can find me on my website, thevaloannerd.com. You can feel free to call or text me at 630-235-2405.
Talk to me what's going on in the world.
CPI, Consumer Price Index, came in right where it was anticipated, and the market reacted bigly, and then we lost all of that reaction. So we are just floating right back to where we were. There is almost a 100% certainty that the Fed will cut rate again at this meeting this month, and anything beyond that, all bets are off.
Well, selfishly speaking, as someone who has one adjustable rate mortgage, cut, baby, cut. Yeah, that will save me some money every month. I mean, in case let me unpack that for a moment. When I was a younger person, in 2007, as a matter of fact, I bought a townhouse. And, hindsight being what it is, buying a townhouse in 2007 was a horrible idea. But who knew at the time, right? So the mortgage I got was is for the first 10 years, it is a fixed rate. So it was 6.25% in February of 2007. And then in year 10 and every year thereafter, it will adjust based on something. So there is a base interest rate, and then based on what's in the note, they add on, it's usually like 2 points. So if it's it used to be LIBOR, I think they found out that LIBOR was a bit of a scam, so they've moved off LIBOR. But LIBOR being the London Interbank
I have no idea
interest
what that
rate. But it's like a prime rate, let's call it,
right.
And then they add a certain amount on top of it, and then that's your new rate each year after that 10th year. So when interest rates went way down, so did my mortgage payment on that property, because I still own it, still in the same loan.
Yeah.
As interest rates crept up, so did my payment. So that affected me personally as that happened. Now, it doesn't adjust each month. Each Fed rate cut doesn't really do much for me, on a month-to-month basis. But each year, when it comes time to readjust, I'm rooting for that interest rate to keep cutting. So I think whatever that interest rate is going to be sometime in February is where I'll be at. So cut that rate, guys.
Kind of a dumb question, but we were all the way down to the 2s, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you refinance and go to a fixed mortgage back then?
Because I bought that place and then the value of it basically dropped by a third. And so I was underwater
Really?
for a long, long time. It did not recover to the amount that it did not recover to to the value that I purchased it for until like 2021. So I bought it in 2007. It wasn't until about 2021, and that's just if you assume Zillow is anywhere near accurate when it comes to its Zestimate. So take that with a giant spoonful of salt. But
So when you said 2007, you meant right before the light switch turned off.
I mean, we were at the top of the roller coaster, baby.
Yeah.
And it's also investment property. So, Joey, maybe you can elaborate as to the differences between refinancing refinancing when it comes to an investment property as opposed to refinancing when it comes to your owner-occupied residence.
I mean, well, refinancing an investment property, right? It's because just investment property rates are higher, right? There's more risk. There's layered risk, right? You're credit qualifying the owner. You're not credit qualifying the person who's actually going to be living in it. Specifically, especially if you happen to be on a condo, because then you also have the warrantability you got to look at. You got to look at the overall risk. You got to make sure that it's it's just more better for rate world to get primary residence rates, right? At the end of the day, investment properties, a lot of people are going DSCR now, the debt service cover ratio loans, because it's a no income loan. It's all about the assets and the rents that you're going to receive from the property. It's also what they really do in the
I want to
commercial
learn
space.
more about that.
Yeah, raise that rent, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
Something I haven't done in about 10 years. My tenants are living in like me subsidized housing, and I can't afford to subsidize anyone's housing. So.
No.
Yeah. No, it's when it comes to the investment properties, I mean, the better LTV position, obviously, the better rates you're going to look at, the better the credit, the better. I mean, granted, it's the same thing with primary. It's just a bigger difference when it's on an investment because at the end of the day, the lower the lower the loan to value, so the higher the equity, the less exposure the lender has on it.
Yeah,
it's just more better.
And in general, it's sort of common sense in terms of the amount of risk for a lender. You're far more likely when the going gets rough, if you will, to go ahead and say, I think I'm gonna pause my payments on my investment mortgage as opposed to the mortgage on the property I live in. And so just inherently there is that increased risk for any lender lending money on an investment property like that.
Interesting.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Patrick, we were talking about earlier, just the mistakes that are made, during I'm going to call it the pre-contract or pre-offer written stage, all right, where people just aren't really prepared. All of a sudden, an offer is either received or given, on a transaction, and then it's a fiasco. 600 things have to happen in 2 minutes. Whether it's the inspection, the mortgage, everything else, it's all got to roll, and you only have a few days to get in there. And a lot of people really aren't ready at that point in time because they didn't prepare themselves properly. And I think you want to speak more and help me out understand this. What are some of the mistakes that you see sellers end up making when they're getting ready to list their house and before they get an offer? What are some of the roadblocks that they just need to be prepared for?
Yeah, well, by the time I get my hands on it, it's often going to be, let's just take an easy example. When it comes to when I get a title commitment, sometimes there will be mortgages that are sort of in the past and no one's let me give a different example. All right, so there is this thing called ghost mortgages, right? So and this again, I'm gonna take us back to the mid 2000s where you may recall if you bought a home in that time frame. And Joey, I'm sure you remember this well, where people didn't want to pay PMI. So the way they got around that is if you had 10% down, you would get an 80% loan to value first loan, and then at the same time you would get a 10% loan to value second loan, so that even though you're only bringing 10%, you weren't paying PMI on either loan. That's how that worked, right, Joey?
Yeah, it's still very popular in the jumbo space, but yeah, it's an 80-10-10 loan, correct?
Yeah, and those second loans, there's a mortgage attached to them, but they're very, very insecure as opposed to a first loan. And a lot of that was based on the incorrect notion, but something that I heard people say all the time back in those days was that real estate never loses its value. It only increases in value. I always wondered about that because I was a young person at that point. I was like mid-20s. I didn't really have any frame of reference to test that kind of statement, but it did occur to me that seemed like it must not necessarily be true, and I was more than proved right about that notion in the back of my mind about real estate always maintaining and increasing its value. That turned out not to be the case. In any event,
there was a big drop during that time, but it did come back.
Well, eventually, in some places, in many places. So these second loans, right? If you were going through life and you were trying to just hang on to your residence, and you had a first and a second, what occurred quite often was that you might get a modification of that first loan, and you would be told some variety of all you have to worry about is making this payment, and that second loan just kind of went away, except it didn't, right? So there's properties out there with this 80-10-10 situation, with this second loan that just sort of forgot about it. And you've got business people out there that they buy this sort of bad debt, as you might characterize it. And so when you loan money and you get a mortgage, that mortgage is there on the chain of title until someone records a release. And if that loan doesn't get paid off, then it's still there, whether or not you're making payments on it. And what has started to happen over the past few years is that as these properties have gotten back to or surpassed what they were worth when those loans originally were taken out, there's now skin in the game, so to speak, for these owners of this debt that have just been kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting. Yeah. And now they're starting to not only attempt to collect on these debts, but they're also foreclosing. And there was a Planet Money episode, love Planet Money, that talked about this, and this is kind of where I'm getting this notion. But it's important, especially if I get a file in and the people who are selling bought the property before 2007, it's probably worth looking into whether or not that might be the case. And I had one recently. It wasn't exactly that, but what had happened was we had this mortgage from 1997 that I just could not figure out what had happened to it. It was just there on the chain of title. It had been assigned a couple of times, and then it was just. It was in the name of a lender that didn't exist anymore, and so you've got to chase that rabbit hole. We were eventually able to track down the lender that held that loan, and as it turned out, at some point way in the past, this client had refinanced, and there was a short payoff on the refi.
I was going to guess. Yeah, I've heard of stuff like that happening with short sales.
So there was, it was, when you refinance, Joey, tell me if I'm off base here, but if someone refinances and it's not a cash out, it's just you're refinancing your first loan, part of that process is to pay off the principal balance of the existing loan, right? Right. So I'm right, obviously, because there's no one to challenge me on that. But generally speaking, if you're trying to pull cash out, that's different. That's just a second loan.
Yeah.
If you're refinancing to say get a better interest rate or whatever it is, then you're paying off that first loan. So the title company handling that refi would call your lender and they would order a payoff statement. And once in a blue moon, there will be an error on the payoff statement. I've had it happen once or twice of all of the, it doesn't happen very often, but it's incumbent upon the whoever's collecting that debt to follow through on it. So, a couple of balls got dropped there. One was the lender accepting that payment. They accepted it and didn't say, hey, it's not enough. So legally they have a bit of a problem there. And that's another tangent I'm not going to go off on. But it was also incumbent upon the title company who is handling that refi to make sure that they obtained a release for that mortgage. So, we're talking about something that happened 25 years ago.
Right.
And so trying to track all of that down. From the seller's perspective, how could you prevent that? There are title companies out there that will. Well, first of all, you could contact me and say, hey, I'm selling my place. Can you pull a title commitment so we can see what's affecting it?
Is that something that you normally do with sellers?
Unfortunately, not. But
No, okay.
it's not a bad idea. Because we can get out ahead of a lot of that stuff.
And isn't that really right there, I think is the key, getting ahead of this stuff, before it becomes a problem, fix the problem.
Yeah. Well, and I think people I think they tend to handle real estate transactions on kind of a, what's in front of me right now, sort of.
That's my point.
They kind of, take things as they come instead of, being ultimately prepared. I mean, I think
that's normal in our society. We're reactive society instead of proactive. But in this situation, I think it's better to, if we have the same common things, and we could just start making a checkbox, all right, let's do this, 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 and this, I think that's beneficial.
I don't know if we're reactive as a society as much as it's more of a, it's just the way that we are accustomed to doing things in that particular context. I mean, if you were looking at a real estate transaction as a standard kind of business transaction, I think people would approach it differently. I think I approach my business, you approach your business, Joey approaches his business, and I think it's more common than not to be more of a to handle it, to plan, as opposed to just sort of, if you're running a business and you're just reacting all the time, first of all, that's chaos.
You can't.
And second of all, you're probably not going to be in business that long.
And I guess you're making my argument right there. And that's why you want to work with people that have been through all this. So they know how to handle those things. So they're not problems.
Yeah. And honestly, I think, this real estate transactions, I think, would be far smoother if buyers or sellers assembled their team before they embark on on the journey to buy or sell a home. Have an inspector in mind, have a mortgage broker in mind, have your realtor locked in, have your attorney locked in. I mean, that's your team. And on the seller side, you're not going to have a lender necessarily, but gosh, I would love for people to approach me and say, hey, I'm selling my place. I want to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row, that there's not any sort of bogeys out there. Let's get the condo docs ordered. Let's evaluate what's in there so that we know how to position it and negotiate everything ahead of time. Let's look up if there are any building code violations floating out there. There's another one. Gosh, I mean, in the city of Chicago,
that's easy.
It's very easy, but it almost never comes up until after you're under contract, which that's a much more difficult negotiation to have once you've established a price. Once you've established a price, and now someone sees that there are some building code violations they're going to have to address. I mean, guess what? As a buyer, you're going to evaluate that on a what's my worst case situation as far as that goes. And of course, as a seller, you're going to say, well, what are the chances of that? Let's not go to that extent. I'm not prepared to assume I'm the worst here. But the buyer goes, look, it's already your risk. I'm the one being asked to assume this risk. I have to evaluate it from my perspective.
I kind of agree with that, but again, I'm usually on the buyer side.
Yes, but I would assume that whatever was discovered in terms of latent building code violations, I mean, it's probably something you're going to pick up during your inspection.
Oh, hell no.
No?
Are you kidding me? No. I mean, when you're talking about building code violations, it's usually going to be property maintenance type stuff. All right. That's where it comes in, or somebody files a complaint down there. But as far as having an open permit, I mean, so many things are done without permits at all. All right. And, so that's not going to be a code violation. I know it sounds kind of goofy, but you got to have the city involved with it in order for the code to even get involved in order to have a violation. And they're the ones that get to decide if it's a violation or not.
Yeah, well, open permit, I think is somewhat of a different situation than what I'm talking about. When you find open permits, especially in Chicago, man, it is so hard to figure out the status of a permit, whether it's been closed or not. The search function on the building department's website, super useful. Glad it's there.
I agree.
However, then you look into it, you find an open permit, and it's like, well, can we find out from the city if it's closed? Sorta.
Yeah, there's no people there to help you, yeah.
Kinda, maybe.
No.
I had one last year, a couple years ago. My clients, the property was originally a 2-flat, and then it got converted to I think it was a 3-flat, and then they brought it down to a 2-flat. It's one of the situations that some people will do. They'll buy a 3-flat because that's, they can afford it. But eventually, the intention is to turn it into a single-family home over the course of time. And the guy who owned it, I think he was an architect. So not only did he have the intention, but he had the skills and the means to make it happen. So by the time my clients were under contract to purchase it, beautiful, an absolutely gorgeous home. But when I pulled up the search on the building department website, it showed this open permit. And the good news was that it was a permit for everything that had been done. So it's like
that is good news.
That lined up. That was good. It wasn't like a permit to put an alarm system in, and then they did a gut rehab of a 2-flat into a single family.
That's been done.
I mean, more often than that, that's what I'm actually going to find. Mm-hmm. I said to my clients, look, it's not perfect, but you're also buying a home in the city of Chicago. Rarely do I see just a perfectly clean bill of health, or I shouldn't say it's rare, but this is very common to find this kind of thing. And as far as finding something wrong in that search, this is sort of a best case scenario in some ways. But where that can come to bite you going forward, it's not so much that a inspector is walking up and down the street looking for trouble. I mean, sometimes they are, but if you go to pull a permit for something else, they'll see that there's this open permit, and they go, you gotta close the permit, and that could get quite expensive, even though
depending what the permit was for, absolutely.
So in this instance, surprise to me, I was like, look, we can ask him to close the permit. I doubt he's gonna do it. He agreed to. But here's how it got resolved, and it was unsatisfying, but at the same time, we weren't going to do any better than this. So he meaning the seller, called the building department to schedule the final inspection, and they called him back and left a voicemail essentially. Yes, sir. Look, we don't have anything on this. You can just consider it closed out. That was it, and it's like, what do I do with that?
Nothing in writing.
Of course not. Of course not. So, the seller goes, look, it's out of my hands. I did what I could do. And, you got to go to the client and go, well, you're spending $1 million. You should, you should walk into this place without any trouble. But, I don't think you're going to find a better situation under the circumstances, in the neighborhood, the characteristics of the home. It's literally had everything they needed except for like that perfect search result on the building department's website. And you know, they had sort of an idea that they were going to build like a second story on the detached garage and make it like a, you know, not an ADU, but a like a workspace, work from home sort of situation.
I'm trying to figure out what ADU is. I'm sorry.
Accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
So that's kind of the, you know, the latest thing in terms of we've got to fix our housing shortage, which is to sort of be a more welcoming to people that want to have additional housing units on their properties. And I forget where it's at. There was a pilot program, I think, Northwest side, where, you know, like coach homes
Over
and
garages,
things
yeah.
of the like, where it's like, you know, mother-in-law suite, whatever it is to get more, because as often as not, when you have those kinds of things, it was probably built without the permit, all of the necessary permissions. Well, you know, it's hard and it's expensive to get those permissions, you know, and it's and to our detriment in many in many instances where it's like, you know, how difficult do we want to make it for people to build stuff that makes sense in places where it makes sense? You know, should we be building nothing but $2 million McMansions because that's the only thing a developer can build as a matter of right, and everyone up and down the block is going to, you know, chew the alderman's ear off if someone tries to put more than one dwelling unit on that property? Well, you know, if you've got $2 million for a home, you're probably like, cool, love it, awesome, lots of those available. You know, relatively speaking. But, you know, if you're someone who, you know, needs housing of a more affordable character, you know, you're not going to have as many choices as far as places to live.
I want to hear how Joey feels about that. Joey, you back? No, we still lost him a little bit, huh? All right. So we'll try and get Joey back on here again, just because I want to find out more things where, you know, these roadblocks have happened on that, because this is really interesting with the permit stuff. You know, and even when we do, and in the city of Chicago, everything is right up on the website. It's really easy to find, you know.
Everything available that is in the records that is, you know,
right.
You know, is it complete? Is it fully accurate? The website itself tells you, you know, you're on your own, kid.
Yeah. No, I got all that. All right. So, Joey, I was trying to feed from you a little bit about, you know, Patrick's telling us that when they're working with the buyer and all of a sudden they do, you know, permit checks on the property, that ends up being a headache. Does the mortgage company do stuff like that? Or do they rely on the title company? How does all that happen?
We rely on the appraiser.
On the appraiser?
Yeah, because if an appraiser sees unit's legal description is a 2-unit versus a 3-unit, we know there's an appraiser's going to be able to identify if work has been done on the property, and they will ask if permits got pulled, right? And there's certain municipalities, Cicero, Berwyn, Lyons, where the municipality actually goes and does their own inspection.
Right,
And
transfer inspection. That's right, North Lake, yeah.
A lot of them do that, and I got a closing tomorrow for a property in Berwyn, and man, that point of sale inspection came back, and it's just like, well, I can't say what I want to say about it. It's a bunch of malarkey, as you're fond of.
I do like that word.
Go
on, Joey. I want to hear more.
No, so we have this wonderful ability to, we rely on the appraiser. Sorry. To let us know, like, hey, this isn't what it says it is. But that's really the only place we see it. Everything else gets handled legally, right? We're worried about the value, and we're worried that the property is at its highest and best use, which is so we don't have a conflict on title. We don't have a conflict between appraisal, because the appraiser is going to look at the title report and make sure that everything is, or I'm sorry, the zoning and the property itself, and make sure that everything makes sense based on what they're seeing. So, yeah.
You know, I just did an interview with, I think it's Channel 4 down in St. Louis. And it was because of something that happened on the Illinois side of the border down there. And because of my role as the president of the state association, they actually had a contractor, and I forgot the name of the small town, but the contractor put a bid in to do work on the lady's house. It was like about $50,000 worth of work. And they did not get a permit for the community. And then when the gentleman was about, I would say 90% completed, he ended up getting hired by the municipality to be the code enforcement official. And he would have been the only one to do the inspection. So he said, well, I can't do the inspection on this because I did the work. So they really didn't do an inspection on the property. Then all of a sudden things started breaking. We're going to bring in other contractors, and they're like, yeah, it's going to be another $40,000-$50,000 for this stuff. So they're doing, I guess this television news thing is one of those on your side type things. But it's like, he's asking me, is this fishy? I'm like, hell yeah, it's fishy. It's like you're doing the work, and then you're going to go ahead and say if you did it right, coming in here. And it's like, I just can't understand how stuff like that happens, but it still happens today. I remember, and I really don't want to mention a town because things could have changed, but when my ex-mother-in-law sold her property, she lived in one of the communities that had a transfer inspection or point of sale inspection, whatever those names are. And the official that came out and did the inspection, he also gave her a proposal to do all the work on all this stuff. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
No, jobs for the boys. It's at its best, it's intended to make sure that people aren't getting themselves in over their heads unnecessarily, right? I think at the point when someone is getting ready to sell, you've got suddenly a pool of money being created by virtue of that transaction. Now, it can either be left to the seller to employ that capital toward having that home be repaired to the quality that community wants its housing stock to be, or you can make it incumbent upon the buyer to undertake that. But either way, you've got a point. You got a moment in time when presumably there's going to be some capital available to do that, as opposed to just walking up to someone's home and being like, you got to replace this, and this, and you go, man, I can barely make, I'm paycheck to paycheck, man. So I think that's kind of where that's like the origin story of it. But at its worst, you're talking about a fairly corrupt system, or not a corrupt system necessarily, but a very corruptible system where
somebody can take advantage of it.
Yeah, because what you end up seeing on these point of sale inspection reports is the work's got to be done by someone licensed in the city of Berwyn, licensed, bonded, blah blah blah, whatever it is, and they have control over who has those credentials, and so it's all meant for the inspector to create work for his buddy, who is the electrician, who is, so on and so forth. And they can kind of charge because the competition, the pool of potential competitive bids is limited. What you create is a situation where it's not a monopoly, but they kind of all sort of, it's a wink and a nod.
Coercion almost.
It's like a cartel
or collusion. I said the wrong word.
It's a cartel type behavior where they're acting in unison to inflate the costs to have that work done, and that's where you go. This is wrong, and it should not be like that. But what you're describing down in Alton or Collinsville or O'Fallon, whatever it is, that's just like another level where it's like I'm not even trying to help my contractor friends be able to afford their above ground pool. I just want to garden my own cookie jar.
No, I'm with you. And Joey, do the appraisers, do they pull permits or do researches and verify if it's there? I mean, how do they know when, work was unpermitted or not?
I mean, they will obviously see that a property is a 3-unit rather than a 2-unit. That's a pretty big giveaway.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
I guess I'm talking more like a new electric system.
It's a very superficial type of review, what Joey's talking about, where they're not getting into the weeds as far as
not at all.
They won't even go on the Department of Buildings website and punch in the address and find out, because I mean, on the one hand, it's outside their remit, but I think because, I mean, gosh, you'd make it darn near impossible to transact in the city of Chicago for any property without a completely clean bill of health. And gosh, I mean,
there's always a list on those things, especially the older houses.
Well, and the last thing you want in this situation, so when the buyer discovers, there's a couple of outstanding violations, which, like I said, is fairly commonplace. As a seller, the last thing you want is to say, yeah, I'll take care of it. And then you get the inspector in, and then they just laundry list you. And, you went from what you thought was going to be a fairly, a simple and inexpensive list to sort out to roofs and replace, all kinds of things. Because inspectors, they, if they're having a bad day, they take it out on you.
Wait a minute.
Why are you making that face?
Are you talking about me, or are you talking about municipals?
I'm talking about the municipal inspector. No,
right.
you're
I never have a bad day.
Yeah. No. I mean, your work has a nexus between, the quality of your work and, the person who's actually consuming the service that you provide.
Yeah.
Whereas the inspector works for a faceless, a government department, and they either get to do whatever the heck they feel like, or they do whatever the heck the who's running that department says to do, and whatever's on their political agenda. And you just can't. You really don't ever want to put yourself at their mercy, because they have so much power to make your life difficult.
Absolutely. But they don't have unlimited power, and the more you know, the more you can battle stuff like that, and the more you can recognize inappropriate behavior. And when somebody tells you, like pulling permits for solar panels, they're like, well, you're going to have to get a person who's licensed to go ahead and install the electric in here. I'm like, no, I don't, and they look at me like, what do you mean, no, you don't? I said, I own the house. I could do it myself. Oh, yeah, you can. They don't tell you everything. They tell you what they want you to do and the decisions that they make with it. So just like what they're saying, it has to be somebody licensed bonded here. That's not in the codes. Nobody has that I'm aware of. You are the king of your own castle. You're allowed to do the work on your own property. But they're not going to always share that with you. And if you don't know that, you don't know that. And I've had code officials, even when we did our remodel, it was, you have to put this furnace inside of a condition or inside of a room. You have to put drywall up in the attic up in here. And I'm like, that's not true either.
It seems like the opposite of a good practice, just because you want that furnace to breathe air.
Well, you have to bring combustion air into the room if you did that anyway, so that is going to still happen. But you can install an 80% furnace in an unconditioned attic. There's no problems at all doing that. There's nothing in the codes. The only time that you have to build a room around a furnace, that's in an attic if it's a condensing furnace or a high efficiency furnace. And that's because water is going to be stored in there, and you have to maintain the temperature where that furnace is going to be. You can't let it be in a frozen area.
Do you remember, Charlie? We were talking earlier about these books I was referencing, and well, I haven't read any of those books. I'm not a big reader.
I'm not.
Nonsense.
But I do have
You've
code
read
books.
all of these in.
I have code books in my bathroom.
Only a complete maniac would have all of this committed to memory.
I don't have. I am a complete maniac. All right.
I know, and I mean that
But I've been doing this a long
I mean
time.
that in
And it
a
didn't
very
come-
loving way. But
know.
you know, most people are not equipped to do battle with a building inspector. In fact, you probably take most of them by surprise, and they don't know what to do. I mean, if some, you know, if you're just walking in and you're just used to being able to spit all kind of stuff, and most people are just like, well, shoot, you know, you must know what you're talking about because you're the municipal inspector. You know, that's 99% of their interactions with the public, and then they show up at your place, and you're like, well, actually, you know, code number 6.2 of the Illinois Plumbing Code says that blah 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 blah. They're just like, even I don't know that, like, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's not something that came overnight. All that stuff does take time, and you're right. You know, to quote Liam Nielsen or Nelson.
I have a particular set of skills.
That's it. That's exactly what I was gonna say. You know.
Yeah.
But it's true. You know, I get into the codes. I get into all this building science stuff, and I always want to know the why. I don't want to know the yes and the no. And I understand human beings don't know everything. But that's one of the reasons why I value you two as well, because you take your craft, we'll call it that, very seriously, and you, quite frankly, you want to know more than your competition. And that's something to be proud of, not embarrassed of.
No, I can't help it. I'm just got this really, I've got this like pit of curiosity that I keep throwing knowledge at that it just never fills up, and it's very annoying. I think if
Like a boat with money. Nothing
sure,
but a hole in the water that you throw money into.
that's exactly right. Yeah, the best thing that you could ever do with a boat is have a friend that owns one. So, you know,
Joey, when you buying a boat,
I should buy a boat.
Yeah.
Who's seen Corky Romano? Anybody?
Yeah, the guy who lives in a desert should buy a boat.
well, that's
but
right. They don't have water out there, do they?
I mean, they kind well. So look, we've said a lot about building code violations, and you know how does it affect. Look, let me just boil it down to the most basic information that a home seller or a home buyer would want to know. It's building code violations are not something that you're going to be able to rely on your lender, the appraiser, the building inspector. At the end of the day, if there's something like that affecting the property, it's gonna affect who owns the property. Period. Bottom line, the buck stops with you. And definitely do not even think for a moment that title insurance will have anything to do with resolving a code violation, anything to do with the condition of the property. Title insurance doesn't have anything to do with that. So, you know, to the extent that you make an assumption, especially Joey with VA loans in particular, and to some extent FHA, I've definitely heard people, I'm sure you have, who go, do I need to have an inspection? I have a VA appraiser going out. You ever heard that one?
Oh, I hear it all the time. You always get, and they don't say the VA appraisal. Do I need to have the home inspection? I have the VA inspection. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a VA inspection. Just gotta stop calling it that. It's not nice. Always get a home inspection from Charlie.
How do I get certified? And this is like the number one question I get asked by new home inspectors when they're trying to expand their business. And then, you know, how do I get certified to be a VA inspector? I'm like, there's no such thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they think that's going to be like, you know.
Well, the realtor said there is. Oh, well, then there must be.
Yeah.
All right.
That's their ticket to Easy Street, because all it is the government, you know, writing checks to go out there and inspect homes that veterans are buying, right?
But this is important to know, you know, especially as a buyer. And Joey, I know that we created that video, and we're going to start putting all that stuff out there. But you know, the minimum property requirements and the minimum property standards. I mean, if you're going to be buying a home, these are the things that the appraisers are going to be, or let me rephrase that, should be calling out. Human beings make mistakes and that. But the more we're prepared for these things, the more we can know how to handle them should they arise. But if we don't prepare for them, and now we're doing, like I said, all these things happen in a 5-day window, that's a short period of time to get a whole lot of stuff done.
Yeah, I had an uncle who passed several years ago. But one thing he told me that I always remember is you don't have to run faster if you start running sooner. So how do we deal with this, right? So I've just told you that as the owner of the home, whether you're the contract purchaser or the seller of the home, that those building violations are on you, squarely on you. Nobody else is going to lift a finger or give you a single penny to help you with that problem. As a seller, I would get out ahead of it, right? I would want to either, if it's in the city of Chicago, you can go on the Department of Buildings website, you can search the property address, and most anything that's affecting the property will come up. It's a very useful tool, even though I've somewhat slagged it off. I use every single property that I'm representing a buyer or seller in city of Chicago, unless it's a condo. In a condo, I'm less worried about that. But certainly for single family or multifamily, I'm always looking at that to see what's affecting the property. If you're a seller and you don't want to deal with the city, which I think is probably the best idea, unless we're talking about, like, Charlie, things that you will pick up are lintels. You'll pick up a porch that is, not built to the standard, things like that, big ticket items, do the math and figure out, if I need to spend 30 grand on a porch, is it going to make sense, or should I? Most likely, if it's me, I would try to work all of that into the negotiation before I arrive at a price with my buyer. If the roof is all alligatory and is obviously there's multiple signs of water infiltration on that top floor ceiling, negotiate that as up front before you arrive at a price with your buyer, because once the inspector comes in, if you never talked about any of that, your buyer is absolutely, especially with multifamily where it's really all about the investment and the buyer's bottom line. Negotiate as much as possible up front. Discover as much as possible about your property and work it into the negotiation. Don't hope for the best later on, because you're just going to be wasting your time. All right.
Time, energy, and money.
As a buyer, okay, sort of similar thing. If you're in the city of Chicago, search the Department of Buildings website. If you're outside the city of Chicago, submit a Freedom of Information Act request. You will get the results back within 5 business days.
5 business? I thought it was like 2. Most of them are really quick.
Yeah, usually you do get it back quicker. Yeah. But they have up to 5 business days to respond. And figure that out and either stick it in your back pocket to negotiate later, or negotiate it up front. Make sure you get enough of a price chop so that the repairs are built into what you're paying for it. It's as
but that's not always the case. I mean, I got to argue that one a little bit, because the biggest thing I've been repeating recently is there's no right or wrong in real estate anymore. Everything comes down to leverage. And if you're going to be buying a house and there's 10 other buyers, you can go ahead and negotiate all you want. They'll just turn you away.
Well, that's okay though.
That is okay though. And
that's
go on.
Okay. I as a buyer, lose that negotiation.
You saved a ton of time and money.
You want to lose that negotiation because if you have superior information to the 9 other buyers and you're offering $10,000 less because of that, let them have it. Yeah. Let them have it. It was not meant for you.
And you got rid of one of the competition on the next property that you're looking at. It's just,
be a smart consumer. Every time you go to the store, you don't have to buy something. If it ain't for you, it ain't for you. And we're not talking about
go to Costco, then it's the law. You have to buy a whole bunch of stuff.
That's not necessarily true. You can go to Costco, you can get free samples.
Yeah.
And you can get a hot dog.
$1.65.
I thought it was $1.50.
Got to add tax.
Oh, stop it.
Oh my gosh.
This guy's so annoying. So annoying. Golly.
Come on, yeah. Let's go. Is that a Pluto laugh? It sounded like Pluto laughing.
It was. Yeah, it was. Or a Snidely Whiplash. I don't know. Patrick, do you know who Snidely is?
No, I'm not old enough to Goodness gracious, what on earth?
We're going back down to the Scooby
What day is
Doobies.
it? What are we doing? I don't know.
No one knows. No one knows. Yeah,
I'm a boomer. Don't be mean to me.
everyone acts like they know what they're doing, but nobody knows what they're doing. The only people that think they know what they're doing are boomers because they live they live in this world where no one has ever told them that they're full of malarkey.
Everyone has told us that horse hockey and malarkey. What are you talking about? I hear that every single day.
And you go, I can't hear you because I have all of the money and all of my money is like clogging up my ears and I can't hear all of the criticism and it's nonsense anyway because we're right and they're wrong.
You just pull yourself up by the bootstraps, Dag Nabbit.
Now you're talking. If everybody else did that, this would be a better place.
Charlie never had an ounce of help from anyone. He did it all himself. He is the standard boomer.
Correct.
Whereas Joey, you and I are just standing on the shoulders of the boomer giants.
I know. I'll let you be there. I love you both.
I'm gonna barf now. Jeez Louise.
We are getting towards the end. We're
Can't
running
believe
out
I
of
haven't
time.
sworn yet.
So now that we know that the boomers are the greatest generation of all time, I'm glad we all agree with that.
Except for the generation that's actually called the greatest. But okay, go ahead. Keep going.
Ooh, I like that.
It is. But let's go ahead and give some, final words and then also go ahead and let people know how to get hold of you again, Pat, please.
Final words. Look, I'm going to repeat what I said a few moments ago. You don't have to run fast if you start running sooner. If you know you're going to sell your home, reach out to me. We can pull a title commitment. We don't have to have a contract to do that. We can find out the things that might pose a problem going forward. I can research what is affecting your property from a building violation standpoint, other things. There's a lot of research I can do to prepare you for the negotiations that you're going to have as you start to field offers from potential purchasers. So reach out in advance. The sooner the better, to be honest. Okay, so that's my pitch. All right.
Yeah, good pitch.
If you are going to reach out, all right, find me on social media. On TikTok, I'm at Loftus Law. On Instagram, I am Loftus_Law. And if you are going to try to hire me and you want to hire me to sell your home, you can call or text me at 773-632-8330. I don't do that very often, so.
Sounds good. Text them at me often in the middle of the night. Joey, please.
Joey Mathews, the VA Loan Nerd. You can find me at theVALoanNerd.com across all the social medias as at the VA Loan Nerd. You can call or text me at 630-235-2405 at midnight.
At midnight.
Yeah, text him and ask him how to get VA certified as an inspector.
That won't go over well at midnight. That's for sure. We really don't have much time. I'm going to ask you this next time when it comes up there. But is there something that sellers, would they have a reason to get hold of you? And don't answer, but would a seller have a reason to get hold of you to go over some loan mortgage documents to see if there's any headaches that could come in there? That's going to happen next week.
I've got a reason
get to
why.
that answer. But we don't have time for that answer. We're running out.
If you're selling, you're probably buying, and you want to coordinate with your lender how exactly that's going to go down.
I love it.
Some people want to buy before they sell so they don't have that sort of in-between situation. And some people can make that work. Some people can't. But talk to Joey because you won't know until you find out from him, and he'll be able to tell you, he's always got an answer within 5 seconds.
I want to dwell on that deeper, but we do have to sign off right now. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Patrick. My name is Charlie Bellefontaine. I want to give special thanks to Devin Tingle. He's going to make everything working.